What's going on, everybody, and welcome to Rock and Roll True Stories. Don't forget to hit the bell notification icon to be notified every time I put out a new story on my channel. Now, it's a pretty common story we've heard in the music business. A musician or band has a hit song, then they can never achieve the same success again. And one of those artists who fits that stereotypes to a lot of people was the group Primitive Radio Gods. Not so much a band as one musician. Primitive Radio Gods' leader was singer and songwriter Chris O'Connor. O'Connor had one of the biggest hit songs of 1996 with the single Standing Outside a Broken Phone Booth with Money in My Hand. The single sold over 500,000 copies in the US, it would go gold, and was plastered around MTV that entire summer. But whatever happened to Chris O'Connor and the Primitive Radio Gods? Well, you're going to find out in today's video. While many people may think that the Primitive Radio Gods' short-lived career was their inability to replicate the success of a hit song, in actuality, the band failed to burn bright for a long period of time due to bad business decisions, stubbornness, and just plain old bad luck. Frontman Chris O'Connor started his rock and roll career in the late 80s as part of the indie rock band I-Rails, which hailed from California and would play shows in Santa Barbara, and the band would end up releasing 4 records but really found no success, and they would break up in 1991 after having started their 5th record. While his former bandmates pursued other musical opportunities, O'Connor used the material meant for the group's 5th album as a starting point for his next musical project, and he began to record new music and would have an album tentatively titled Rocket. And O'Connor would try to send out his music to local radio stations in 1994, but none of them picked up on what he was doing. Disappointed, he temporarily forgot about his music career, and it was around this time that he got a job as an air traffic controller in Los Angeles, but he found it to be a stressful job. And one day he was cleaning his apartment and he found that demo tape in his closet. And he did really the unthinkable. He would ship out the demo tape to every major label and A&R guy he could think of, and normally a tactic like this wouldn't work, but it did. The tape featured the hit song Standing Outside a Broken Phone Booth with Money in My Hand, which featured a sample of the B.B. King song How Blue Can You Get, which came across the desk of Jonathan Daniel, who happened to work at the London-based Fiction Records, which had recently opened an office in New York. According to O'Connor, who told the LA Times in 1996, the song got played at a listening meeting, and Kip Cronus at Sony UK calls me up and tells me he wants to release it as a single. Later, here I am in London working in a very low budget video, which still costs more than the album that I made for about $1,000. I still had my day job as an air traffic controller, so I had to call in sick 3 times from London, he'd say. To promote the album, O'Connor would have to assemble a band, so he reached out to his former bandmates in I-Rails, and he would form a new moniker called the Primitive Radio Gods. The name of the band would come from an I-Rails song from the group's 3rd album. The single would peak at number 1 on the alternative rock radio charts, while the album would debut at number 60 on the Billboard 200 charts. The band would also be licensed and used in the 1996 Jim Carrey movie Cable Guy. And a Sony publicist put things into perspective regarding the band's success in the mid-90s, saying, "Well, let me put it this way. Hole debuted outside of the top 200, and for a band that no one had heard of outside of a small area and wasn't married to anyone in Nirvana, Primitive Radio Gods are doing really well," they'd say. O'Connor would end up quitting his air traffic controller job just as the group's album started to gain traction, but the band's business outlook hampered their success and created problems with their record label. O'Connor would tell PauseandPlay.com, "It was bad from the very, very beginning, coming over to Columbia US because we were originally signed to Columbia London, and there was a lot of pressure to get songs into movies, and I kept saying no. And finally we did do that one movie, The Cable Guy. I also wanted to be able to do my own stuff. That's what causes a lot of tension with any major label. You're wanting to do it yourself, but they have a plan for you. Whatever's happening on the charts at that time, they try to push you in the direction, and they want you to look a certain way and write a certain song to fit that format." O'Connor would also claim that adding to the friction was that the record label didn't treat the group very well after they made the label millions of dollars, especially when it came time to renegotiating their contract. According to O'Connor, he'd say, "There was this whole thing about when we went to renegotiate. They offered us like nothing after they had already made millions of dollars and got the record for nothing. It was bad blood from the beginning," he'd say. By early 1997, O'Connor intended to write the follow-up record with his old bandmates, but they were suddenly dropped by the record label. O'Connor would recall, That's why it was such a shock. It was like, it's fine if we fail. If we make a second record and there's no hits and nobody likes it, but we don't even get a chance to fail, he'd say. The band would be thrown another life preserver when Jonathan Daniel, who first discovered the band, would help them get another record label contract with Hi-Fi and Sire Records, but bad luck struck again. The band was getting ready to release their follow-up record. They already had a release date and everything, but at the very last minute their label would merge with London Records, who gutted Sire, and the band got stuck in limbo. The new label didn't want to release the group's album, but they also didn't want to release the band from their contract. Compounding things was that the label owned the name of the band at one point, and they couldn't just go create new material under that moniker. And as the band waited for things to pan out, they had to find day jobs, with O'Connor being forced to take a job delivering flowers. Eventually, London Records dropped the band, and once again Jonathan Daniel was there to rescue the group and sign them to his own Boulder, Colorado-based indie label, What Are Records. The band's sophomore record titled White Hot Peach would finally be released in the year 2000, but failed to meet the sales of their debut record. The group would continue to release several more records on the What Are Records label before simply deciding to release their own music through their website. And after the release of White Hot Peach, the band would release a few additional works through the What Are Records label. The band's most recent release was their 2016 record, Man-Made Sun. And as of 2020, the band is still active and recently played shows with another 90s act, which was Toad the Wet Sprocket. O'Connor, for his part, has been fairly press shy and doesn't do a lot of interviews. So let me know your guys' thoughts on the Primitive Radio Gods in the comments section below. And do you guys remember that song getting a lot of airplay on MTV and on the radio in 1996? I certainly do. I still hear it every now and then on Lithium on SiriusXM as well. So thanks for watching, guys. If you have suggestions for future topics, throw them in the comment section below. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you guys want to support my channel, simply watch another video. Go check us out on Patreon, starting as low as $2 a month. Take care.